You've likely imagined how it would feel to instantly possess a complex skill, playing a guitar solo or speaking a second language. For an adult, these skills move from childhood fantasies to professional necessities, like understanding code or navigating the shift toward AI. But the sheer volume of new information we're expected to master can feel like drowning. We struggle to keep our heads above a constant flood of technical requirements and shifting financial landscapes. We often attribute this difficulty to a lack of discipline, but the problem is rooted in our foundational training. For years, school conditioned us to approach learning through the cram cycle. We were taught to absorb dates or formulas just long enough to pass an exam, only to purge the information the moment we walked out the door. This training produces temporary memorization rather than true learning. Mastery is the transition from that conscious, heavy effort to automatic execution, where you perform a skill as naturally as typing on a keyboard or riding a bike. When we set out to learn something new today, we default to those same habits. We dive into dozens of tutorials, read dozens of articles, and highlight every line. Passive consumption creates a false sense of productivity. Your brain mistakes the act of watching someone else perform for the development of your own capability. This chart highlights the discrepancy. You can accumulate massive input volume by watching videos and reading, but your execution capability remains stagnant. Reading about swimming will not keep you from sinking. The first time you attempt the skill in the real world, you freeze. You realize that while you've observed the process, you have never actually experienced it. Learning is a contact sport. To move past the input stage, you have to move from the sidelines and into the work itself. Real progress begins by applying the Pareto principle, or the 80-20 rule. You filter out the peripheral noise and focus exclusively on the foundational elements. In a new language, this means learning the 1,000 most common words that make up the vast majority of daily conversation. Mastering that small 20% of core effort yields 80% of the results. It is the fastest way to bridge the gap between a beginner and a practitioner. This level of focus requires removing the distractions that fragment our attention. Deep learning occurs when you silence the phone and give your brain the space to work without interruption. Once you're locked in, you use active recall. Instead of rereading a chapter, you close the book and force yourself to retrieve the information from memory. It feels difficult because it's supposed to be. Inside the brain, a new concept looks like a flickering, weak electrical signal trying to bridge the gap between two neurons. The mental struggle of retrieval forces your brain to reinforce that specific pathway. Each attempt thickens the connection, acting as resistance training. The discomfort of trying to remember is the physical sensation of your brain building permanent structural memory. You also have to engage in deliberate practice. Instead of repeating the tasks you've already mastered, you must intentionally seek out the areas where you still fail. To sustain this through the frustration, use gamification. Tracking small wins and milestones triggers dopamine, which helps provide the motivation required to keep working on the difficult parts. You can further solidify these pathways by involving multiple senses. Combining direct visual study with active audio listening and kinetic physical writing creates more points of contact for the information to stick. Combining the friction of deliberate practice with the rewards of gamification and sensory engagement works like an industrial adhesive for new skills. While active study is vital, much of the actual learning happens away from your desk. Pushing through a single 6-hour cram session actually undermines your long-term retention. Look at the drop-off in retention after a single burst of study. Spaced repetition, revisiting small amounts of information over several days, creates a staircase effect that keeps the information accessible. Forcing the brain to repeatedly dig up that information over time clears the mental pathway, making retrieval easier and eventually automatic. Sleep serves as a primary tool in this architecture. While you rest, your brain organizes data, strengthens newly formed connections, and removes irrelevant information. Rest is not a break from learning. It is the biological process that finalizes it. The final test of mastery is teaching. Explaining a concept out loud exposes the gaps in your own logic and forces you to simplify your understanding. Eventually, you reach a state where you execute the skill in the real world without thinking. The resistance is gone, and the knowledge is part of you. Learning capacity is not a fixed trait. By utilizing these cognitive tools and adopting a growth mindset, the belief that you simply aren't good at something yet, you turn the act of learning into a predictable process of building ability.